education system was brought together by the promulgation of the South African Schools Act. The first governing bodies were democratically elected by stakeholders for their first 3-year stint in 1997. In terms of the South African Schools Act, one must consider that there have been 8 amendments to the South African Schools Act since then. The 9th Amendment has been published for comment. One of the challenges to school governing bodies is the ongoing amendments to the existing legislation. In theory, the model envisaged in Education White Paper 2 was that of decentralization of powers to the school level. Thus, the model of self-managing schools was first mooted. Unfortunately, this decentralization of so-called powers to the SGB level, who would then manage the so-called self-managing school, has not materialized. Today, we have ordinary and special public schools. Ordinary schools are placed by the provincial departments into quintiles, which is broadly speaking based on the poverty level of the school. Quintile 1, 2, and 3 are no-fee schools, where no fees may be charged at that school. Quintile 4 and 5 are fee-paying schools. A resource funding allocation is made available from the state to the public school based on the number of learners in the school and on the poverty ranking of the school. Special public schools are funded by what is known as a subsidy based on the weighting of the learner's disability. Special public schools are fee-paying schools. So what is a functional school? Functional is not defined in the statutes. The Oxford Dictionary offers to clear the way. Functional is defined as working or operating in a proper or particular way. So one would assume that a school is functional if the public school is operating in a proper way in line with existing legislation. The focus in this presentation will be within the prescripts of the Constitution, the South African Schools Act, and here we will just mention one of the sections. The governing body of a public school must promote the best interests of a school and strive to ensure its development through the provision of quality education for all learners at the school. We will also talk to NEPA, where the Minister shall determine national education policy in accordance with provisions of the Constitution and this Act. It is our opinion that a hands-on, properly constituted SGB has the fundamentals to begin the onerous task of governing a school within the confines of existing legislation to develop a functional school. A functional school needs a few vital elements. The SGB is accountable for its actions, is responsible for seeing to it that the learners at the school receive quality education. A well-disciplined learner component will further enhance a functional school. Overview of the impact of the SGB. It was is a bold experiment in school-level democracy. It improves school links with parents in most schools. Parents have a say in the fee level, obviously if there are fees charged at that school. Stakeholders at the school elect the members of the SGB. The elements of the SGB. Many SGBs are working well. We have to admit that. Good leadership and management vital to improve prospects for all learners. The governors are the largest voluntary workforce in South Africa. That means they do not get paid. SGBs may join a voluntary association such as ours. Now we'll just cover governance in broad strokes within the confines of the South African Schools Act. The SGB must submit a copy of its constitution to the head of department in the province within 90 days of its election. Ensure that the SGB is properly constituted. This means that when a vacancy arises on the SGB, a by-election is held to fill the position. Strive to ensure quality education for all learners at the school. Decide on the policies for the school after consultation with the stakeholders at the school. And then we will talk, they need to develop a language policy, a religion policy, an admission policy, as well as an admission policy, safety and security policy, adopt a code of conduct for learners, which sets out disciplinary procedures, sanctions and rules, adopt a constitution setting out how the governing body will operate, adopt a school mission statement setting out the values and beliefs of the school, decide the times of the school day, maintain the school property, buildings and grounds, make recommendations to the head of department in the province with regard to the appointment of state paid educators at the school, establish additional posts at the school subject to the Labour Relations Act, ensure procedure in place to collect school fees, obviously if they are fee paying, ensure that the allocated funded resources from the state are spent appropriately, ensure there is a school development plan with short, medium and long-term plans for the school, develop the budget for approval by parents at the AGM, ensure parents, learners, educators and staff to render voluntary services to the school, support the principal, this is vital, learners, educators and staff to render voluntary services as well. Develop with the SMT the academic performance plan for the school, ensure that the learning support material and movable assets are correctly maintained, ensure that the prescripts of the legislation and policies are implemented. And this is vital, to work within the parameters of the legislation. Ensure that the financial statements of the school are audited. Ensure that by the 30th of June, a copy of the audited financials are presented to the HOD. Additional functions. All SGBs must strive towards having the necessary capacity to carry out Section 21 functions. The SGB should then apply for these additional functions, which will allow the SGB with the capacity to spend the resource allocation paid by the state into their bank account, thus giving them the satisfaction that the funds are spent appropriately. Membership of a governing body. You have elected members with a vote. Those are outlined. These are parents, which are always in the majority, educators, support staff, and learners if you are in a high school. The principal is an ex officio member of the governing body. They are co-opted members, but they have no vote. Office bearers are elected every year from the members of the SGB. The office bearers are the chairperson, deputy chairperson, treasurer, and the secretary. Meetings of the SGB. It is usual for functional SGBs to meet at least once a month in a school calendar year. Although the SASA states that a school must meet at least once a term. So you will see there's a minimum requirement, and then obviously some go the extra mile and have the monthly meetings. Functional SGBs usually have established subcommittees, and these are finance, grounds and buildings, health and safety, disciplinary hearing committees, interviewing committees and HR matters, legislation and related matters, quality learning and teaching campaign, which would be associated with curriculum matters. Report back by the chairperson of the subcommittees on at least a quarterly basis is essential. The purpose of subcommittees is to effectively establish working groups which deal with specific tasks allocated to it by the SGB. The subcommittee may not take decisions. All recommendations from these subcommittees must be tabled by the chairperson of the subcommittee on at least a quarterly basis to the SGB. SGB elections are held every 3 years. This is an opportunity for stakeholders to elect parents, their representatives on the SGB structure, educators, their representative on the SGB structure, support staff, their representative on the SGB structure, and obviously learners in a high school, their learners on their representatives on the SGB structure. Key to functionality. The governance of every school, public school, is vested in its governing body, and it may only perform such functions and obligations and exercise only such rights as prescribed by the Act The governing body stands in a position of trust towards the school. The governing body of a public school must promote the best interests of the school and strive to ensure its development through the provision of quality education for all learners at the school. An academic performance report must be prepared and tabled at a governing body meeting annually by the principal. Financial responsibility and accountability. Every school governing body must make information available for the inspection by any person insofar as such information is required for the exercise and protection of such person's rights. The SGB must provide information about the school as is reasonably required by the head of department in the province and the Director General of the Department of Basic Education. The SGB must keep records of funds received and spent by the school and of its assets, liabilities and financial transactions. The SGB must appoint a person registered as an auditor to audit the financials statements of the school. Financial year for all public schools is January to December. A school governing body may not enter into any loan or overdraft agreement so as to supplement the school fund without the written approval of the MEC. No person may alienate any assets owned by the public school to another person or body without the approval of the MEC. The assets of a public school may not be attached as a result of any legal action taken into account against the school. A school governing body may not collect any money or contributions to parents to circumvent or manipulate the payment of compulsory school fees and to use such money or contributions to establish or fund a trust. The school governing body must prepare a budget each year which shows estimated income and expenditure of the school for the following year, and this includes schools that do not charge fees. The budget has to be presented to a general meeting of parents, convened at least 30 days' notice for consideration and approval by a majority of parents present and voting. The SGB must inform the parents that the budget will be available for inspection on at least 14 days' notice. The SGB may not give a state employee unauthorised remuneration, and that is under Section 38A, without the approval of the HOD in the province. School fees in quintile 4 and 5 schools may be determined and charged only if a resolution to do so has been adopted by a majority of parents attending the annual general meeting. No public school may charge any registration, administration or any fee except school fees. Liability of parents to pay fees. A parent is liable to pay the school fees determined by the parents at the AGM. In fee-paying schools, the SGB would need to consider the regulations for exemption of parents from the payment of fees when drawing up the budget at the school. The public school may by process of law, enforce the payment of school fees by parents who are liable to pay fees. The learner may not be deprived of his or her right to participate in all aspects of the program of the public school, despite the non-payment of school fees by his or her parent. Responsibility of the state. Out of the funds appropriated for this purpose by the province, the head of department must establish a program to provide continuing training to governing bodies to promote the effective performance of their functions or to enable them to assume their additional functions. The member of the Executive Council must provide public schools for the education of learners out of funds appropriated or for this purpose by the provincial legislature. The state must fund schools from public revenue on an equitable basis in order to ensure the proper exercise of the rights of the learners to education and the redress of past imbalances. The Provincial Department of Education, within the norms, must transfer the resources to schools by the 15th of May or before the 15th of November of each year. Discipline of learners. The SGB must adopt a code of conduct for learners after consultation with stakeholders at the school. The purpose of the Code of Conduct must be aimed at establishing a disciplined and purposeful school environment dedicated to the improvement and maintenance of the learning process. The SGB must conduct disciplinary proceedings against a learner within 7 days after the suspension of such a learner. The SGB may suspend a learner who is suspected of a serious misconduct. A learner may only be expelled by the head of department. The SGB may ensure that no person at the school administers corporal punishment to a learner. Any person who contravenes this is guilty of an offence and liable to conviction to a sentence which could be imposed for assault. The SGB must ensure that no person conducts or participates in any initiation practices against a learner at a school or in a hostel accommodating learners in a school. Any person who contravenes this is guilty of misconduct, and disciplinary action must be initiated against such a person in accordance with the applicable Code of Conduct, prescribed sections of the Employment of Educators Act. Random search and seizure. No person may bring dangerous objects or illegal drug onto school premises or have such object or drug in his or her possession on school premises during any school activity. And obviously this would include the teachers. SGB stakeholder meetings. The SGB has an obligation to meet and report back to parents, learners, educators, and support staff at least once a year. A functional governing body should strive towards the following principles of governance. Undertake the governance as a matter of trust towards the school community. Faithfully and diligently perform tasks and functions allocated to them in a consultative and democratic manner. Observe the requirements of fairness and even-handedness in all administrative action to be taken with the course and scope of their functions. Provide constructive support to the principal and staff at the school in the performance of their immensely important task of educating the learners at the school. Create out of available resources a user-friendly environment for the staff and learners alike. Uphold the Bill of Rights set forth in the Constitution of the land in every facet of the activities of the SGB and the school. Observe and comply with the relevant laws and policy governing education and the delivery of quality education at the school. In conclusion, the matter of governance is not to be taken lightly, and all the members of the SGB need to be aware that they can take their school to the top of the ladder, and that this comes with commitment from the group. The functionality of schools is dependent on their functional governing bodies. The road to functionality is complex, as the SGB has to comply with the existing legislation landscape, which is constantly changing. It can be safely said that a functional school has the elements of a functional SGB, functional school management team, a partnership with the other stakeholders and parents at the school, a teacher in the class teaching every day of the school year is also an essential part of the pact. Functional school governing bodies usually have membership of a functional SGB association, which keeps them informed of the latest developments on the education front. The SGB Association has a supportive role to play in the functioning of the SGBs of public school and assists the members being more effective and efficient. Let's strive for functional SGBs that can support quality education in all our schools. Thank you.